What does being whitewashed mean in the Indian community?
3 signs you're a whitewashed Indian. First up, if you can't name a Bollywood movie or a Bollywood song to save your life, then you are whitewashed. And if you can't name at least 5 Bollywood movies and 5 Bollywood songs, then you're whitewashed. Next up, if you prefer Western food over Indian food, then you are beyond whitewashed. Now, Indian food is the top 5 cuisine in the world, no doubt. If somebody from India tells me that Indian food is disgusting, there's no hope for them at all. And finally, if you can't understand or speak to a small degree your parents' native language, whether that's Gujarati, Hindi, or Punjabi, then you're whitewashed. And if you can't understand the language, then you're cooked, you're whitewashed. That's what it is.
Bro, I haven't even seen Kuch Kuch Hote Hey, yeah? Don't ever call me Indian. Like, my dad might be from Punjab, but that doesn't matter. I'm from Surrey, and I'm like, my olive skin's because I'm Spanish.
Yo, what's your name? Sanjana? Yo, that's like so ethnic. Where's my family from? Yeah, I don't really know, but I think we're like Hindus or something. Yo, namaste, auntie. Is Priya here?
Yo, I cannot be eating any more carbs like this. It's killing my gains.
The feeling of not belonging as a British Asian is so exasperating. Whitewashed in a room full of Asians and an outcast in a room full of white people.
My Punjabi isn't the best. A lot of people give me shit for saying that I'm whitewashed or I don't eat enough Indian food because my stomach physically can't take it and I've got IBS. How can I be enough like my own people but also integrate into today's world that needs me to be somebody else, not somebody who lived in the bin 50 years ago?
This is where we've got as communities got to stop doing that. It's a form of racism. I'll give you an example of what happened. In one of my documentaries, I was given a lassi to drink in India, and I said on camera, oh, I've never had a lassi before. And I had so many people saying, you're a coconut, how can you never had a lassi? I mean, you've got to stop being so prejudiced. And frankly, it's a version of racism, judging people for their authenticity in being brown.
So yes, today we are going to be talking about everyone's favorite term in the brown community and the general idea of what it means to be whitewashed. And it's important to note that this notion of people being whitewashed is not specifically a concept which only exists in the brown community, and it goes for all other ethnic minorities. In the East Asian community, if you're deemed to act white or show traits of a white person, then you would be labelled as a banana, which is yellow on the outside and white on the inside. In the black community, terms like Oreo have been used which describe being black on the outside and white on the inside. And in our community, our food of choice was the coconut, which is obviously brown on the outside and white on the inside. And these are all terms which essentially describe people of non-white communities who try to act white or are essentially distant from their own cultural heritage, but they just use food to do it. And I'm going to talk about terms like that later in the video, but I first of all want to talk about the general consensus around the word whitewashed and how I see it being used within our community specifically. And I have to say that based on how I see people use this term online and in real life, I think that the majority of people don't actually understand what it means. Because the term whitewashed has origins in describing when ethnic minority actors are replaced by white actors, and it was even used at one point to describe people from ethnic minorities who would worship white supremacists. But now in 2024, you're whitewashed in our community if you don't watch Bollywood, or you're whitewashed if you don't eat dal every day. If you listen to a certain type of music, then you're whitewashed. If you're a girl and you dress a certain type of way, then you'll get called whitewashed. If you speak a certain type of way or you have a predominantly non-brown friend group, then you're whitewashed. If you don't drink chai every day, then you're whitewashed. And I'm pretty sure if you attempt to breathe in the brown community, then you're whitewashed and there's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, clearly people don't understand what this term means and there's barely any nuance to this conversation. I mean, based on some of those statements, I'm pretty sure 90% of the community is whitewashed and no one in the diaspora can classify themselves as Indian. And even people living in India, bro. I mean, some of these statements are just ridiculous within themselves, especially the one about Bollywood, because by calling someone whitewashed, you're basically just trying to say that they're ignorant towards their culture and they don't pay enough attention to it. But the Bollywood statement is ignorant towards the culture itself because it doesn't acknowledge the dozens of other film genres within India. And it says that to be Indian, you can only watch Bollywood. I mean, shout out to all my Tollywood and Pollywood watchers out there and everyone who watches the dozens of other film genres coming out of India. And it's obvious that the term whitewashed is a negative term and it's basically used as an insult in our community, and that's for a number of different reasons and not necessarily because there's anything wrong with being white. I mean, if you're white then you're white, but it's basically more to shame those who don't participate within their culture. But it is weird if you think about it because you're essentially trying to gatekeep Indian culture to those who are actually Indian by calling them whitewashed. And how I would describe it is it's a way of calling an Indian insufficiently Indian. Like they're an Indian who doesn't have max XP, or they're an Indian who's like a 3.2 on the Richter scale. Not Indian enough to do any damage. Now, to be honest with you guys, I don't think I've ever been called whitewashed or a coconut, and if I have, then I just can't remember. And maybe that's because I don't meet the criteria of the more Indian than thou people who call others whitewashed. And I've been in both situations throughout my life where I've been around a lot of white and non-Desi people, and also situations where I've been around exclusively brown people, especially in the UK. But what I will say is that I've definitely had my Indianness questioned by people from the mainland. I mean, I was in a conversation with this one international student who came straight from India, and I think I must have mentioned my channel to him just to get his thoughts, and he specifically asked me why I consider myself Indian or brown, and more specifically why I called the channel The Brown Experience. Now, if he was talking about just the name of my channel, then yeah, I'd question it as well, because I can't lie, that name is so cringe. I don't know what I was thinking when I chose that name or why I even thought that would work. But yeah, I feel like I'm too deep into this YouTube thing now and I can't change it. But what that guy was obviously implying and asking me was why I decided to claim that title of being Indian or brown, because I wasn't born in the motherland, nor have I experienced what it's like to live in that country for a long time. And the simple answer to that is to do with optics. Unless I all of a sudden became the Michael Jackson of the Indian community, I wouldn't be able to change the fact that I'm brown or Indian. And this reminds me of a tweet from J. Cole, who by the way is my favourite rapper, even though he kinda let me down this year, which reads, "Lol, yeah, I'm half white, but when I get pulled over, trust I'm black." Obviously, J. Cole here is talking about the shock from people online hearing that his mother is white. Now, I'm not saying that I can necessarily relate to or have been through the specific struggle that J. Cole is talking about in that tweet, but I can relate to the overall sentiment, because even though I'm from the UK and live in the UK, I'm still treated as brown and as Indian, and obviously that comes with its own set of unique situations. But I'd make the case that my experience isn't that dissimilar to those living in the motherland. I mean, I have a quote-unquote Indian name which people and teachers would mispronounce on the register. I used to eat Indian food every day coming back from school. I used to play cricket, attended cultural functions which people attend in the motherland. I have a bank account set up in India, and I had people telling me to go back to India and the country that I came from. So what's the real difference? But listen, I don't have to do too much explaining and try to prove how Indian I am to some goose online. But I do think that there are distinctions which need to be made when talking about the idea of being whitewashed, and I don't think that there should be overlap between these things. Now, I've read quite a few articles on this topic of being a coconut or being whitewashed, and I think that there are three crucial distinctions that need to be made when explaining the reasons why people get called whitewashed in our community. So the first reason why people get called whitewashed is because they don't know much about their culture, or they're ignorant about certain things. And based on what I've seen, this is probably the biggest reason why people are considered whitewashed, and it ranges from obviously not watching Bollywood to not eating Indian food. But I'm pretty sure the most notable reason why people get called whitewashed is if they don't speak or can't understand their native language. Now, there's a bit of a grey area with this one, and I think there's two sides to this argument. On the one hand, there's a theory within some South Asian communities that their native language is dying out, and in the near future the language will be forgotten and people won't be able to speak it, and there's a fear that their language and cultural heritage of hundreds of years will go extinct. So there's a real sense of urgency in those communities to make sure that the next generation can speak in their native language and pass it down to their kids. Therefore, if you can't speak your native language, then you're going to be a lot more prone to criticism within the community, and that's when terms like coconut or whitewash come into play. But I feel like you have to consider the other side too. Why are more people in our generation not able to speak their native language? And from the people that I've spoken to, it's for a lot of reasons. One of them being that they were able to speak it when they were younger, but as time passed there's just less need to speak it, because everyone else speaks English, so naturally if you aren't speaking in this language every day, you're gonna forget it. And another reason is because they have no one to practice the language with or teach them. The majority of people probably learned that language when they were younger with an older relative like their grandparents, and when you start growing up and those relatives unfortunately pass away, then you don't have anyone to speak to in your native language who can teach you. So to call someone whitewashed for that reason is bordering on being disrespectful. And within our community, I feel like there's a lot of pressure to at least understand your language, and if you don't, then it's shameful or embarrassing, especially if you're like a young adult and you don't know it. There's one TikTok I saw where this girl was talking about how she started taking Punjabi lessons at 22 after she had forgotten most of it despite being able to speak it when she was younger. And obviously the coconut allegations started coming through in the comments, and in general people just leave comments on these types of videos trying to make it seem like it's something shameful. And even if you can speak and understand your native language but you mispronounce things or you say things in a certain way, then you'll still get absolutely flamed by the aunties. So there's really no winning. And I can't lie, this has happened to me on a few occasions, but I blame my British accent, man. I can't really change that. But I think trying to shame people for not being able to speak their native language in the West is slightly ridiculous, and I'm going to explain why. Now listen, I get the first argument about wanting to preserve cultural heritage and passing the language down to your kids. And I saw one guy on TikTok who was very vocal about this, and he made some valid points, and he said that we should be actively encouraging for people to speak in their native language more. But I saw another TikTok from this same guy, by the way, where he was basically saying that if you aren't able to speak your native language from your childhood up to now, then you should be embarrassed with yourself and that you're a coconut. I mean, make it make sense. Those 2 points directly contradict each other, because by shaming someone for not knowing their language, how are they ever going to learn it? Or why should they feel the need to learn it if you're just going to be shamed for not knowing it? And another thing I want to say is that even if you're like 20 to 30 and you can't speak your native language, then you're not cooked like TikTok would have you believe. Just because you don't know it now doesn't mean you have to spend the rest of your life without knowing it. There's definitely still a lot of time to learn it if you want to learn it.
That yes, language is an essential part for your cultural identity, but it is not a prerequisite to embrace your cultural identity.
I mean, if you're actively trying to learn about your culture and where you're from, then there's no real reason why you should be called whitewashed. And even if you're not trying to learn, then you still aren't whitewashed. But I feel like this leads me into my next reason as to why people get called whitewashed. And that's people who know about their culture but choose to disassociate with it or not participate in it. And I know a few people who will willingly call themselves coconuts or whitewashed because, I don't know, they like rugby more than cricket, or Indian food isn't their favourite, or they hang around with white people and listen to Taylor Swift. Now, are these people whitewashed? No, obviously they aren't. They're still Indian. Everyone has preferences in certain things, and you can't impose culture onto others and force people to like it. Naturally, you're going to gravitate to things that you like and things that appeal to you, regardless of whether you're Indian or not. And if anyone tries to tell you that you can't listen to something or you can't do a certain activity because it's not brown or it's not what Indian people do, then they're just a weirdo, I can't lie. Do what you want, and it might sound a bit tapped to say this, but in 100 years you're gonna die either way. So don't do something because your ancestors told you to, because you won't be alive to see the consequences either way. And that goes for literally anything in life. Now, the majority of articles that I've read basically make the same points about how terms like whitewashed and coconut are offensive terms and are technically racist. But when I found threads on r/ABC Desis, some people did think that there were some acceptable ways to use terms like whitewashed. And this brings me onto the final category of people who get labelled as whitewashed in the community. And that's the people who openly discriminate against or hate people within their own race. And for whatever reason, it seems like there's been a rise in this. Now, I put Rishi Sunak in the thumbnail not because I think he's whitewashed or because he's a coconut, because I don't know how in tune he is with his culture or how much he values his Indian roots. But if you look at the majority of discourse online around people who use these terms, then people like Rishi and Vivek Ramaswamy often get placed in the conversation. There was even a woman who was arrested in the UK after she was holding up a placard with an illustration of Rishi Sunak and Swella Braverman amongst a coconut tree. Now, there's many reasons why this could be, but I feel like the majority of Indian politicians in the UK are kind of grouped into one category of being whitewashed or not representing the majority of South Asians in the UK. And that would obviously be politicians like Rishi Sunak, Swella Braverman and Priti Patel. Now, Swella and Priti Patel in particular both push a lot of anti-immigration rhetoric in the UK, and they're strongly opposed to a lot of immigration. Now, personally, I don't really look into all the immigration talk because I've always been on the other side and I'm more interested in leaving the UK as opposed to coming in. But I feel like if you are South Asian and you have certain opinions on immigration and kicking people out, then you are definitely viewed less favourably within the community, because a lot of South Asians benefited from coming into the UK, and South Asians did a lot for the UK's economy. And Priti Patel in particular even said that she believes her parents came to the UK illegally, so a lot of her points can be viewed as hypocritical. And in general, if you are an ethnic minority and hold these types of views, then obviously you're going to be looked at weirdly in the community.
The illegal people are coming into this country, you're giving You're giving them all benefits.
I don't know why Auntie's lying. Me and her, we came here on the same boat. Surely this has to be some sort of friendly fire. Or like an own goal. Or something like that. Because, bro, I'm assuming she's not illegal by her being on such a high horse and saying this. But we're all immigrants at the end of the day, you know. Like, when we're walking around on the street, it doesn't say on our forehead whether we're a legal immigrant or an illegal immigrant.
I feel like that's one of the reasons why this genre of British Indian politicians are hated by the majority of the South Asian community and seen as whitewashed. And if you are a British Indian politician, then there definitely is a high expectation for you to represent the community and serve our people. Now, regardless of what you think about immigration and the mess that is UK politics, there's one clip stateside which absolutely cannot be denied and definitely warrants a bit of criticism. And that is from none other than big boy Vivek Ramaswamy. And you probably know which clip I'm going to be talking about, but it's the one where Vivek is on an American news channel and the white anchor specifically says to him that she likes his policies and what he stands for, and she thinks he's intelligent, but she would not vote for him because he is an Indian. Now, I'm not even joking, that's word for word what this clip is. And when I first watched this, I was absolutely baffled at how he could sit there and just let her say that to him. Now, I get it, he's in a professional environment and he can't lash out at her or say anything wild. But me personally, and I don't know about you, but I could never let this slide. And he never condemned the clown that was interviewing him for her obviously racist comment. Now obviously, I'm not going to call him a coconut or whitewashed because again, I don't necessarily think it's right to do that. But there is a reason why he's the poster boy for whenever people in our community talk about coconuts or being whitewashed. And in that same interview, Vivek even laughs along with a joke she makes about black people being unintelligent. I mean, how much of a clown are you to think that you're one of the good minorities and that she won't treat you the same way? I mean, forget the Raja twins or that fight guy because they know what they're doing, but I'd argue that Vivek set us back much more with that 1 minute clip and he didn't even know it. But yeah, the final reason why people are called whitewashed within our community is because they don't defend us or try to stick up for our issues. And I think there is a thing going around right now about people hating the idea of being Indian or hating their own culture, most likely due to anti-Indian sentiment going on right now. I mean, all you need to do is go through Reddit a bit and you'll see dozens of posts about being ashamed of being Indian or how people hate being Indian. And that's either because of some baseless stereotypes which people use against you, or because they've seen a news article from the motherland, or they see something like the scams or the poverty which makes them feel ashamed. And for whatever reason, people use this as a way to make themselves feel inferior. And I don't know why, but as of late, I've been receiving the as an Indian comments a lot lately, especially on the videos where I talk about the hate against Indians. And they essentially use these as an Indian comments to justify hate against their own people. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but you do not need to apologize for every single bad thing going on in the mainland, or for whatever you see other brown people do in the diaspora. Unless you're the person doing these bad things, then there's no reason why you should be apologizing on someone else's behalf and making yourself feel inferior just because of some BS that you see others do. And that's not to say that you can't call out the BS that you see, but you can't make yourself feel bad for something which you can't control. But yeah, yap session out of the way, those are essentially the three main reasons why people can be seen as whitewashed in the community. And I feel like more productive discussions need to be had and a bit more critical thinking needs to be used when you try and label people with these terms. But what do you guys think? What do you think about people using terms like whitewashed or coconut? Do you think these terms are acceptable to use? Do you have any experiences with people labeling you as this? Do you think that there are problems with this narrative? If so, then please share them and let me know in the comment section. And please share your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. Also comment any topics or types of videos you guys want to see next. And please like the video to help the video's performance in the YouTube algorithm. And please also subscribe with notifications turned on because I am going to be uploading weekly. Safe.